So first, tell me, how old were you when you were first diagnosed with CMV?
So I first realized that I had CMV around the age of 14 when I received my father's kidney. It was within the first year of transplantation.
And can you remember at that time what symptoms you had?
So I was very sluggish, kind of very tired, kind of felt slow in mind and body. Um, so yeah, I guess those were the main things. I was very sleepy as well, like I would take midday naps quite frequently.
And how does that compare to the CMV episode that you had last year?
It was similar in the sense that I still had the sluggishness this time round or last year. But also this time I had uncontrollable bowel movements, which weren't pleasant. So yeah, I was frequenting the toilet. Fortunately, I guess the silver lining of COVID being that I was isolating anyway, so I was always close to a bathroom. So I guess in some senses, COVID kind of worked for me in that sense.
Okay, and I think you've described it really nicely, the difference between what probably was CMV syndrome for the first way you described it and CMV disease the second time, where it's clearly affected your bowels and possibly causing some colitis. And so can you remember how you were managed for CMV both times? And can you tell me a little bit about your experience with both?
Sure. So the first time, as mentioned, I was about 14, maybe 15. So I was still in pediatrics at that point. I was treated with IV medication, so intravenous medication, and I was isolated into a cubicle, and only one nurse was allowed in, and I wasn't really allowed any visitors. So my mum decided she was going to stay with me. The whole treatment in the whole lasted approximately a month. So my mom basically kind of lived with me on the pediatric ward for like a month. So that was very kind of cabin feverish because you're in this like small little cubicle for a whole month. And at that age as well, you kind of want to go out and do stuff and live your life.
Okay, and I think you've touched upon this a little bit already, but I mean, from a day-to-day basis, kind of how did CMV affect you?
So yeah, as mentioned, very sluggish, kind of tired, sleeping a lot more than I usually would. Also the mental aspect of missing a lot of schooling and not being able to do my GCSEs properly when I was younger, had a mental effect and also in turn affected my results. And this time round, even though I wasn't in hospital, due to COVID, I was isolating anyway. Um, so when I was 14, I was isolating in hospital, but this time around, I was isolating in my house. So both times it's kind of felt very cabin feverish, in the fact that I've had to stay inside, for different reasons, of course. But yeah, it's not been pleasant. And this time around with the bowel movement issues, and change of color and things, that wasn't very fun either. I was missing a lot of sleep that I would usually get at night, because I needed to repeatedly go to the bathroom. So yeah, it's not been fun, but it did pass, thankfully, no pun intended.
How did CMV kind of infection impact you as a transplant patient during the pandemic? I mean, you mentioned obviously the isolating at home, but with regards to how you were looked after and your follow-up, how was it during the pandemic?
I was isolating anyway because of COVID though this time, but I did have the freedom of moving around my own house, so that was handy as opposed to just one box room. Um, and it was treated mainly by tablets this time round, and my consultations were mainly done on the phone. Unless I had to go in for a blood test, which I had to physically go in then. Um, most things were done by phone. So appointments that didn't require blood tests and were just kind of catch-ups of how I was feeling, how I'm doing, and discussing blood results from bloods that I had been given, were all done via the phone. Again, I guess the silver lining for me was because I had more bowel issues, um, being at home was kind of handy, because there was always a toilet nearby. So silver lining, I guess. But generally, again, the whole kind of staying in and kind of watching the outside world through a TV or through your window or whatever it might be, was and still is to some degree quite frustrating. And it just, I guess, people generally miss human contact. And I guess when you're immune suppressed or had a new transplant or have an illness where you have to kind of shield or isolate or whatever the condition may be, um, I think it does mentally change a person, whether they realize it or not. So I now have this kind of anxiety of what's the world going to be like when I properly enter it again? Like, are all the protocols going to be the same? Like, am I allowed to shake hands? Should I not? Will people find that rude if I did or didn't?